ARY Rosenbaum here with another fun-filled episode of that 4K podcast. This week's topic, we're going to talk about the good, the bad, and the fiduciary, an action plan for 401k plan sponsors. But of course, first things first, go to that 401ksite.com, sign up for our National Virtual Conference at the end of the month, as well as our events in Chicago in April and in May, Denver, Colorado, and hope to have soon the date up for Washington. And of course, go to Amazon.com. It dropped this week, that 401k Plan Provider Handbook, the fourth book I've written, and the first one that's primarily about 401k topics and not my life story and all that kind of stuff. So I hope you pick up a copy in Kindle and in paperback. And of course, Full Circle is still available, as well as the other books, all four available on Kindle. 3 of the 4 are available in paperback. Appreciate if you bought a copy. Let's get to the topic at hand. When I was a senior in college at the State University of New York at Stony Brook, which is now known as Stony Brook University, I was an editor at the college paper, which was the Statesman. I was managing editor, and then I took a little bit of a demotion that I wanted. I think I was like layout editor, editorial page editor, or whatever. I also had a column there. But I helped lay out the paper on PageMaker, which is the predecessor to InDesign. And that is one thing that I learned that I was okay with, and that certainly helped me out. I do all the layouts on my articles on InDesign, so I enjoy using that talent that I learned back from college. But it was an interesting point where, twice a week, you'd have to put a 16-page newspaper all together. You'd, start the production night 8 o'clock at night. By 6 in the morning, you had to have a newspaper done. That's why, I think it helped my writing and hurt it. I can write reasonably quickly. In legal writing, I don't think I'm very good at that, and I probably blame it on the Statesman. And what was interesting about that time and having that, newspaper and all that space to block, sometimes we didn't have enough content and advertising for the pages, so we would do house ads. And my buddy Tom and I, 2, 3 in the morning, you have this weird warped sense of humor. Before the Union building closed for the night and we were locked into the building, we would go to the Union Deli and load up on caffeine and at the time Ben & Jerry's ice cream, which I won't eat now for political reasons, but we'd load up for the night and Mountain Dew, Diet Mountain Dew for me, and 2, 3 in the morning we'd have all this empty space and we'd do with the house ads for the newspaper, and Tom and I would be at the computer and we would come up with advertising ideas that the only 2 of us would understand the joke. We went to an Aerosmith concert one time at MSG, and there was a guy, we had floor seats because I was part of the Aerosmith fan club, and there was a guy who would just stand on the seat and then wave to somebody he knew in the crowd, and we thought that was kind of weird, so we would have... I'd do a house ad for his, Staham was the sports editor. It would be Statesman Sports. Our coverage is so good, you want to stand there and cheer and wave to the crowd. And Tom and I are the only ones who understood the joke. A sweet mate of mine got hit in the head during a baseball game. It was a Stony Brook baseball game and got hit by a foul ball. Would make a joke of an ad for that. And I don't do that now anymore, but what I do sometimes is I'll write articles and I'll see how I could fit like my favorite things into articles. Write an article about Airplane, write an article about The Godfather, the Rocky movies, all that kind of stuff. And it's just, I do it to entertain myself and see if I could actually do it. But I also do it because I think that people actually enjoy that stuff. I think Mary Poppins said it best, a spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down. And I think that if you write topics that people will get, like, references to like Caddyshack, it's just going to make the article about an uninteresting topic to most people sound fun. So, lately I've been doing that, just, you know, you're writing a weekly article, you've been doing it for 15, 16 years. You think you're going to run out of topics. And so sometimes to break it up, I'll come up with an article that talks about one of my favorite things, a TV show or a movie. And this week's topic, the article that will be published soon afterwards is about the Fistful, the Good, the Bad, the Ugly, the Fistful trilogy, uh, done by Sergio Leone, starring Clint Eastwood, The Man with No Name. Um, Back when I was in law school and I had a lot of free time my second and third year, they opened up a Hollywood video uh, near the campus, and I had one of those small TVs with the DVD player, and I would play, get a cheap rental and just like watch the old classics. So I, got to watch a lot of movies from the 70s and 60s, and that's where I first fell in love with the Fistful trilogy, the Man with No Name trilogy, Fistful of Dollars for a few dollars more, and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And quite honestly, um, I like now Once Upon a Time in the West more than any of those. But I thought it'd be funny sometimes to talk about the Fistful trilogy and see how it applies to the 4K plan world for plan sponsors. So let's make a go at it. A fistful of dollars cleaning up the town, plan governance. A fistful of dollars, the man with no name is out there. He enters a lawless town which is divided by two, crime families, two rival families, and nobody knows who's, running the show, even though everybody claims authority. And, that's what a lot of 4K plans look like. There are unclear roles, outdated processes, and no one truly in charge. So step number one, the plan sponsor has to, establish clear governance. There needs to be a written fiduciary charter, defined roles and responsibilities, a documented review schedule, and minutes for every committee meeting. Without governance, the Rojo family firing randomly into the air, which makes noise but not running anything. Action step number two, it's important to review your plan documents. Plan sponsors don't, review plan documents. Always reminds me of that Chris Rock joke. If you want to hide something from somebody, a plan sponsor, or even some of the administrators that I work with, you should just, put it in a plain document file because nobody's going to look there. But the plain document covers everything: definitions, quadro policies. It's the most ignored plain document. Document that the company has. It's important for a plan sponsor to identify when the time it was last amended, restated. Uh, are you actually following the plan document? And a mismatch between plan terms and plan operations is the quickest way to turn your quiet frontier town into a gunfight. Action step number three, it's important to evaluate payroll integrations. Payroll errors are a big deal. Eligibility miscalculations, incorrect compensation, misdeferrals are the modern equivalent of the backstairs setting the stable on fire. You have to fix it by creating a payroll flowchart, testing compensation definitions, running annual audits of eligibility and hours counting, and aligning pay codes with plan definitions. Bad info. In the Sergio Leone universe, bad information gets people killed. In a 4K plan, bad information gets corrective contributions, lost earnings, and a whole host of headaches. Number two, for a few dollars more, which is actually my favorite of the three, probably because of working with the right partner. And that right partner in for a few dollars more is Colonel Mortimer, played by Lee Van Cleef. You need the right ally to bring down, a ruthless criminal. And I think that plan sponsors need to have their own version of Colonel Mortimer. And it's important, action step number four, benchmark service providers. The record keeper, TPA, advisor, and auditor should be scrutinized regularly, not because they're incompetent, because fees, technology, and services evolve. It's a fiduciary duty to evaluate, plan providers. If plan providers are doing a terrible job, you're not doing your job evaluating, you're going to be a problem. Even Colonel Mortimer vetted the Man with No Name, and Man with No Name vetted Colonel Mortimer. You shouldn't really wait for a Department of Labor investigation to discover that your plan provider wasn't a good fit. Action step number 5. Fee lawsuits are the modern 401k equivalent of bounty hunters. They appear suddenly, strike hard, and look for the weakest of plans. Plan sponsors need to, benchmark their fees annually, identify the fee structure, document the reasonable analysis, and eliminate unnecessary or redundant services. You don't win by being the fastest out there. You win by being the most prepared. Number 3, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Finding the buried treasure, the whole final film, which is a longer and more, very interesting film. There's a hidden treasure, and it's important for a plan sponsor to understand their treasure, which are plan investments. And action step number 6, review the QDIA. It's not a one-time pick where you say, at the beginning, we're going to use this fund. A QDIA has to be correct all the time. And you got to look for glide path suitability, fees, underlying fund structures, long-term performance, and whether it matches participant behavior. And if it doesn't, get rid of it. Go to something else. Action step number 7, it's important to monitor the investment lineup. An IPS is a treasure map, but only if you follow it. I will always say that implementing an IPS and not following it is far worse than never having an IPS, because you've shown somebody that you've had a process and you've decided that you're not going to follow your own rules. So it's important that plans conduct quarterly performance reviews, evaluate risk adjustment returns, document watch lists and decisions, and remove chronic underperformers. When Blondie and Tuco argue of which direction to ride, they consult with what they know and make decisions quickly. That's how plan sponsors have to, deal when picking investments. It should be based on data, not emotion. Action step number 8, avoid ugly investment options. You got to get rid of those excessively expensive funds, proprietary restrictions, and revenue sharing structures that aren't transparent. They are the angel eyes of the 401k universe, dangerous, deceptive, and only serving themselves. If a fund only benefits the provider, not the participants, shoot it from the lineup. Number 4, the ecstasy of gold, participant outcomes and education. At the end of the good, the bad, the ugly, Tuco, who is the ugly, he circles the cemetery searching for the right grave. And, sometimes participants' behavior looks like that. Wandering, guessing, and panicking. Plan sponsors can't force employees to save, but they certainly can create an environment that encourages it. Action step number 9, strengthen auto features. Auto enrollment, auto escalation are gliding compasses, but they fail most often where payroll meets operations. Sponsors should review default percentages, confirm eligibility dates, audit missed deferrals, and maintain written notices and disclosures. If Tuco had a clear map, he wouldn't have sprinted in circles. Participants need the same sort of clarity. Action step number 10. It's important to improve communication. Let's face facts. Participants aren't interested in reading a megillah of a disclosure written by lawyers who bill by the hour. They want simple, plain English explanations, video or short infographics, clear time limits for enrollment, and examples of long-term compounding. Same way with my writing. I don't have to justify my fees by writing legalese. I can just write it in a language that people are going to understand. And I think it's important to do that for, plan participants. Put it in a language that they can understand. It can be very, very overwhelming to be a plan participant in making all these investment decisions. And if you put it in a communication that they could certainly understand, it's better. Blondie in those movies, doesn't, he didn't waste words. He made every word count. Plan sponsors shouldn't either. Clarity really builds trust, and trust drives engagement. Blowing up the bridge, reducing fiduciary risk. In the finale of The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, Blondie and Tuco blow up, a bridge. not out of chaos, but to eliminate the obstacles stopping them from reaching the goals. Sometimes sponsors need to eliminate obstacles as well. Action step number 11, have a litigation mindset. You got to assume that every decision may someday appear in a courtroom. That means document everything, keep minutes, maintain checklists, follow the IPS, and review service agreements. A well-documented decision is your poncho, light, simple, and the difference between surviving and getting shot. One of my ideas, always is thinking about game theory. What decision I make, what will the other side do? You have to understand that your actions have consequences. And a lot of times, I think it's really important to make decisions and understand what the negativity could be with the decision. I've seen too many times in my life where I felt I got slighted by somebody because they didn't think how their decision would affect somebody like me. And I think that it's important to always understand that a decision you make as a plan sponsor could, certainly get ERISA litigators on your radar, which is something you don't want to do. Action step number 12, conduct annual plan audits. You don't need a full independent audit unless your plan is large, but you should perform operational compliance tests, loan reviews, hardship substantiation checks, fiduciary file cleanups, and eligibility verification. If the man with no name checked every rifle before a duel, you can check your plan at least once a year. Riding off into the sunset, the sponsor's long-term mission, good fiduciary, is going to have a plan that's going to run smoothly. The fact of the matter is, it's a tough job. You only get you do a great job as fiduciary. You don't get the compliments, but when something goes wrong, you certainly get the complaints. You don't do things to get the applause. You just do it because you want to do a good job. A good action plan out there is going to protect participants. A great action plan protects you. A Leone-level action plan survives scrutiny, volatility, and the unexpected twist. So it's important as a fiduciary to do a good enough job. Last but not least, running a 401k plan is certainly not glamorous. It's dusty work filled with paperwork, compliance tests, and meetings that feel longer than Tuco's marathon through the cemetery. But with the right governance, the right partners, the right investment discipline, and the right communication, you can build a plan that's as resilient as the man with no name himself. Because in the end, there are three kinds of people in the 401k world. The good, which is prepared plan sponsors. The bad, which is unprepared plan sponsors. And the ugly, those who wait until a problem explodes. It's important as a plan sponsor that you choose wisely, in my opinion. So that's going to conclude this episode of the 401k podcast. And again, like I said, go to that 401ksite.com. Information on all our events. That 401k National Virtual Conference is about 3 weeks away, and it's free to attend. And if you do miss a minute or two, it will be available on YouTube so that you could, listen at your own leisure. And of course, live events, Chicago and Denver are up and ready. And if you want to partake in the National Virtual Conference and sponsor, it's free if you sponsor one of the live events, which start for as little as $500. And last but not least, go to Amazon.com for the latest book, that 401k Plan Provider Handbook, available in paperback and Kindle, as well as the other books, which includes Full Circle, which came out last May. I enjoyed writing Full Circle that much that I knew I had a right off the bat, I was going to let another 7 or 8 years go by without another book. This time, I hope I actually sell some copies. But you can find everything on Amazon.com. And tune in next week for another fun-filled episode of that 401k podcast. Take care. Bye.